I would like to get your, I mean, you did allude to this a little bit, but your thoughts on the fact that, former President Trump has talked about retribution. The Supreme Court is talking about absolute immunity, at least in the use of core powers of the Constitution, which again, it's still undetermined as to exactly what that means, how far that extends. Is the country moving in a direction? The justices are taking a lot of power, giving a lot of power back to the courts. What direction are we seeing? And like as you said, they're taking power away from Congress to create certain types of laws, giving a lot to the executive branch as well. What trend are we seeing here, and what are your
Right.
thoughts about what's
Well,
happening?
well, one of the things to notice here about misuse of the Justice Department is that it was particularly striking in the Roberts opinion today that he singled out contact with the Attorney General as part of that core constitutional function that for which a president would be totally immunized. Now that's really striking because we're used to saying that there should be a kind of unofficial separation of powers between the White House and the Justice Department. And this really washes that away to say that, um, members of the Oval Office, because remember, it doesn't just cover the president, it covers all members of the Oval Office, can freely communicate with the Attorney General and presumably his staff. Um, just suggest that using the Justice Department to punish enemies and reward friends could be done all the more freely with no ramifications for the close members of a president's administration or members of the Justice Department, presumably. Though it's not clear whether or not the immunity would extend to them since they're outside the Oval Office. But if this is going to raise a whole host of complicated legal questions that will have to play out, and one fear is that when you have a concept like immunity, even the narrow boundaries that the Supreme Court did set on that concept in today's opinion can be themselves overrun by the logic of that concept, and that it can start to expand further and further. And I'll give you one example of that, which is I filed a brief with 14 national security professionals in the immunity case, in which we argued that even partial presidential immunity would create grave confusion within the chain of command, because you could have an individual in the chain of command who has received an illegal order from which the commander in chief is immune for prosecution, but someone lower down in the chain is not immune. And and they won't know what to do because they'll face a Hobson's choice of either disobeying their commander in chief, in which case they could be court martialed, or um, committing an illegal act, in which case they could be court martialed. So, either way, they could be subject to serious legal repercussions if the president starts making illegal orders. And there'll be no risk to him because he'll say, "Oh, I'm acting within my core constitutional duties because I'm acting as commander in chief." So basically, any order that the president would give to the armed forces, he'll claim commander in chief authority over, and it doesn't matter how illegal it is.
Yeah, it sounds like at the minimum, it has muddied the waters, and as you mentioned, like separation of powers and the giving of orders, and just a whole host of issues that now will be back in front of the courts potentially, and as also as you said, potential opportunity for abuse. But I really appreciate your insight and analysis, Professor Finkelstein, on these issues. And I think also, I guess we didn't get to this, but of course, this has delayed the case against former President Trump until after the election. At least it's benefited him in that way. So,
Well, I can say something about that if you
yes,
want me to,
please,
which is
please.
there will be significant delays because obviously on remand, this is going to take a long time to sort out official functions and core constitutional functions, because now there are three categories, not just two. It's not just official functions from personal capacity acts, but there's, you know, that higher level category of official functions and constitutionally protected official functions, then official functions, then personal capacity acts. It's going to take quite a long time to sort out. And so the really big risk is what happens if the trial is still ongoing when Donald Trump becomes president. It will be pretty much impossible at that point to continue the trial, especially now, you know, we're sort of going in a circle here, but now that Donald Trump has been given immunity, he can therefore fire Jack Smith, fire anyone involved in the case, and threaten witnesses and do, you know, anything that he wants to do to make it impossible to hold himself accountable. So his bid to stand above the law he's succeeding in that bid, unfortunately.
Yes, this decision has in many ways turned the democratic and judicial process on its head. And this after a lower court and appeals court found that President Trump, former President Trump, was not immune to prosecution. So this was an interesting decision, monumental by the Supreme Court. Again,